What have you got
Yes.
for us?
Okay, you guys, I'm sorry. Anybody who has known me more than like 5 seconds knows that my massive love for Vincent Price is still real and in full effect. So I had to go ahead and talk about the Monster Club, which I don't know if any of you guys.
Uh,
I
Here
love
it
that
is.
movie.
Okay, I'm so glad because I love it. It's kind of one of those things where, it's not the greatest movie you're ever going to see. I understand that, but it's on brand for me. It's Vincent Price and it's 80s, barely. It's 1980. Um, but this is talking about horror anthologies. Like I always want to mention this, and a lot of people don't know. A lot of people haven't seen it. Yes, it's so hard. Look, I'm reversed on the thing. It's so hard to find it on Blu-ray or even DVD, VHS. I mean, crazy money. Elvira hosted it in the 80s, and that VHS like was the only way to get it for a while, and then finally they got smart and started doing DVD and Blu-ray with it. But it's a horror anthology. It's 1980. It's very, I feel, I don't know what you guys think, but I feel it's more 70s in the aesthetic and the just the way that it was done, but then it has some 80s music infused in it. It's just kind of crazy. Like honestly, if you can't just find something to enjoy in this, I have to question you. So the director, I have to read his name.
Roy
I wrote
Ward
it down.
Baker.
Yes, thank you. Roy Ward Baker. And this was his last movie, actually. And I feel like it's kind of a love letter to like the horror greats before horror kind of became more of a broad spectrum accepted genre. So, the people who are in it, Christopher Lee was offered a role originally, and then he turned it down. And then John Carradine, who was like in The Howling and a lot of other things, he took that role. And he plays the author R. Chetwynd Hayes, who the stories in this anthology are based off of, but he plays that author in the movie. Go with me here, even though the author apparently wasn't a big fan of the movie. And he comes across Vincent Price, who is Aramis, who he is a vampire, and he is his biggest fan, but he unknowingly kind of grabs him and bites him, just not enough to turn him into a vampire, but enough to sustain. So he wants to make it up to him by taking him to his favorite local hotspot, which is actually the Monster Club, where all the local different monsters congregate. It's like a private kind of club, secret society, whatever you want to call it. And so then we have the interludes of crazy 80s music in between each story. There are 3 stories besides the wraparound, which is the Monster Club itself, which is basically Vincent Price telling ghost stories to John Carradine, which is kind of epic and exciting. Apparently, when this opened, it actually, where and when it was released, it couldn't get a broad theatrical release in the US, but it was on Vincent Price's 70th birthday, which is super exciting to me as a Vincent Price fan. But anyway, I digress. I mean, Donald Pleasance is in this, and, Donald Pleasance. So, there's like my 2 faves. So it's great to see as far as that time period and to kind of go back to it because it has this 80s music, but the actual stories are filmed in more of a, to me, and more, like I said, more of like a 70s or even maybe almost 60s vibe for one of them. So and there are some other horror greats from back in the day that are in this as well. Those are just like 2 of mine. But the 3 different stories kind of, well, first, the beauty part is I had to write down a couple of the quotes. Vincent Price at one point says, where is it? He says, oh, no, I'm sorry. Well, what he says I'll come to, but in one of there are just a lot of good little little quips, little quotes. Like Donald Pleasance in the one story says, "Why were those limbs of Satan bothering you?" I mean, limbs of Satan. I don't know. There's just some funny little things in it that are kind of amusing. But the three stories, basically, we start with Vincent Price talking to John Carradine about the Monster Club itself. It's a nightclub with a ton of people in terrible, terrible plastic masks, like straight out of, I don't know, 60s, 70s, early, 1980, whatever, pre 1980, just very obviously people in masks that were like $50 an hour extras or whatever, but they're all supposed to be real monsters, and you have to go there with your mind, and I appreciate that. But he's telling the story, and there's this entire like tree of life chart of monsters and their origins, and if they crossbred, what that monster combination was called, and what is this monster combination called. And that's where these stories come from. So he's talking to him, and he's talking to him about these monsters. So the first one is, I always say it wrong, that's why I wrote it down, Shadmock Story. That is, Shadmock Story is the first in the anthology. And this poor guy, his power is whistling to kill people in a horrific way. So you just don't want him to whistle. And he's kind of got Phantom of the Opera makeup, kind of, they're kind of doing that kind of homage to that. And he lives in this mansion, obviously he has a lot of money, and there's this couple, and they're kind of hustlers, and they decide that she's going to try to get a job there so she can find the combination to the safe and rob him. And then he asks her to marry him. So it becomes an entire separate story. It's very, to me, that one feels kind of 60s-esque. Like, I don't know why I get like Rosemary's Baby kind of vibes from the way that was filmed, or maybe even Dark Shadows. But the actual stories are pretty interesting. I don't know if it matters if I tell spoilers since it's a movie from 1980, but that one was pretty interesting. Has kind of a cool, creepy ending. I mean, this movie as a whole is not it's not a horror movie in the fact that it's going to scare you or anything like that. But it's just one of those that you're just going to kind of enjoy. It's a great movie to like have on in the background. It's classic. The people in it are classic. But my favorite out of the three, besides the wraparound, is Vampire Story, which is the second. That one, Donald Pleasance. It starts with the comment that I was trying to remember earlier. Vincent Price talks about directors to John Carradine, and he says something, and the guy comes out and he says, he's a vampire? And then Vincent Price is like, aren't all directors? Aren't they all? It was so funny. I don't know. There's a lot of little comments like that throughout it that are just amusing if you're a movie fan, a horror fan in general, and that sort of thing. But Vampire Story basically then tells the story of that director's childhood, because he was a vampire, and not knowing that his father was a vampire and all of that. So Donald Pleasance pretends to be a clergyman so that he can approach the little boy and find out where his dad lives, because he's a vampire killer. And it's just, you can tell that Donald Pleasance is having like so much fun with this. I mean, this was after Halloween. And you can tell that he's just kind of like, okay, you know what? So this is the type of movies I'm doing. Let's do this. Let's have fun with it. And I love that. And so that's when he makes the limbs of Satan. He grabs the little boy's being bullied, and he says, why were those limbs of Satan bothering you? And I'm like, I'm going to use that somehow. But anyway, that story goes through basically Donald Pleasance trying to get to the little boy's father, who is a vampire, and it has a plot twist at the end, which is cute. And I'm probably going to say her name wrong, but Britt Eklund, who was like a big time 60s heartthrob, she plays the mom of the little boy in that story. So that one was pretty interesting. And then the last one is called Humgoo Story. And that is in between, when we're flashing back to awkward tight shots of a band member in purple lipstick singing crazy 80s music. Just really uncomfortably long tight shots on this guy's face. Then the third story is Humgoo, and that is about a ghoul mixed with a human, and the story, that story. And Patrick McGee, who plays the innkeeper, he's a director and he's scouting for a location, and he wants to use this village. He drives through this mist. He sees this creepy village. He says he wants to use it, and everybody there kind of acts like zombies. And there's a girl who is a human and a ghoul, a Humgoo, and she tries to tell him how to escape because they're going to eat him, because what they do is they dig up dead bodies and they eat them, and they use their clothing, and then they use their coffins for wood. It's very, you gotta suspended disbelief. But anyway, so that is kind of an interesting one. And there's a comment, then when they wrap around to the Monster Club, at the end, Vincent Price wants to induct the author because he's written so many amazing stories, because these stories he was trying to give him so that he could write about them, because he's his biggest fan. And so when he's talking to him and he says, okay, here are these stories, he then says, we want to induct you into the Monster Club. And the others are like, wait, why though? And he says, because he's human. I mean, how can you have a Monster Club and not have a human? They've created weapons and bombs and all these things. And it's just so telling. And especially to watch this again in 2021, it's like, yeah, we're pretty monstrous. Like, we are the monsters, literally. Like, we can use it for good, we can use it for bad. And it's kind of got this little like cautionary tale just in his little monologue at the end. But this is all amongst everyone in these monster outfits, partying and dancing to a live band, again with the crazy 80s music in between. I don't know, I just think it's kind of epic. Vincent Price, Donald Pleasance, 80s movies, vampires. It's the only movie that Vincent Price ever was a vampire in too, so that's kind of interesting through his career of lots of horror movies. But I just think it's fun. And again, like we were talking earlier, intellectual horror is great, but we are kind of living in a horror movie right now in a global pandemic. So why not have a little fun? And so I'm a huge fan of this movie, and it is on Amazon Prime. So you don't have to like hunt all over the internet for it. It's on Amazon Prime right now as well. But the Blu-ray does have 2 different interviews from the 80s with Vincent Price, which are really cool, and definitely worth it. So
cool.
That's it.
Very cool. Yeah. Any other fan? I know, Christian, you're a fan of the Monster Club. Anybody else?
Oh yeah.
I've never seen it before. I got Amazon Prime. I want to order it now.
The poster is great. That's what sold me. The poster sold me like so fast. I was like, oh, I got to see this. I've got to see this.
I gotta like throw up double horns for Roy Ward Baker, because this guy, everyone knew in classic Hollywood, people know him for A Night to Remember. I could give a shit, right? But directed Quatermass and The Pit, The Vampire Lovers, which is the first part of the Karnstein trilogy.
Yes,
trilogy.
Scars of Dracula, and at the very end of his life, he kind of, in scare quotes, directed The Masks of Death, which was the last time that Peter Cushing played Sherlock Holmes. So you know what? Royalty, period. Full stop.
Nico wants to know, are the Vincent Price interviews with David Del Valle?
Yes, they are. Yes.
There you go, Nico.
Yeah, I was afraid I wouldn't remember his name when I watched it. I'm like, yes, I do. I'm telling you, I can't like quarantine. I can't remember anything. It's sad.
Which story do y'all like the most? The first one was my favorite. I love the first one. I love that mansion because it did feel very 60s. You know what I mean? The first story was my favorite one, and I love the ending of it. So which one do y'all like the most?
I think it's a really consistent film. I think that unlike certain anthologies that it's easy to pick a favorite, say Baba's Black Sabbath, it's really easy to pick the last piece of that, right? Because it's just such a mind-blowing thing. I think that, I don't know, Monster Club is pretty consistent all the way through, and I think you have a good ride. I would actually agree with Susan. I think the wraparound is what I love the most. So
yeah.
I've added it to my watch list on Amazon Prime, so.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't know if I've seen it or not, to be honest.
I don't remember either, so I'll have to give it a watch on Amazon.
The
You got
old
me hooked.
I love it. So
got me
glad you
hooked.
reviewed that. Yeah.
I'm
I'm
hooked at
glad. I
Donald
was
Pleasence
so
and Vince
questioning it. I was like, oh, I don't know. Is everybody gonna think I'm
For
weird?
the record,
But
I just
hey.
want to say, yeah, this is like a little Spanish release that I got on Amazon Prime. It is I think it's a Blu-ray R. It is, but I mean, it was like $17. So I mean, if you want to own it, you can get that, but just know it's a Blu-ray R. But it looked fine. But of course, it does not have those interviews like Susan's. Susan's got the
Okay.
legitimate.
Mine is
Yeah.
actually like a US region version and everything. But again, unfortunately, Christian, I did spend, I think, $30 on eBay for it. But I had to have it. I'm a huge Vincent Price fan. So, but I mean, if you don't have to have those interviews, if you're not like, if you pay for Amazon Prime, it's free with Prime. So if you already pay for Prime, you can just click play. You're good to go.
If you haven't seen it since the VHS days, search it out now too, because the VHS copy was horrifically cut. Not for content, because there's really nothing in the movie that would get it that's objectionable, but it was a horrific transfer that was missing segments of the film. Basically, between every reel change, there's like a minute missing. So the VHS is about the worst way to watch it. So if you had a bad impression of it because of that, give it another shot now.
Okay.
Great review, Susan. Great choice.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thanks.
Be sure to subscribe to the Region Free YouTube channel and also check out the Patreon to get exclusive content and become a Regionaire.